Hi automotive enthusiasts, welcome to Octane Origins, where today we dive into one of the most extraordinary cars ever to come from Europe in the post-war era, the 1955 Mercedes-Benz 300SL Gullwing. This isn't just another old sports car story, it's the tale of how a race-bred machine transformed into a cultural icon, shaped the future of automotive engineering, and became one of the most coveted vehicles in the collector world. You've seen its unmistakable upward opening doors in countless photographs and movies, but what's behind the legend is far richer than a design quirk. Imagine a world still recovering from the devastation of World War II. Europe's industries struggling to rebuild, nations redefining themselves, and automotive companies either failing or reinventing. In that climate, Mercedes-Benz had to prove it was not just back in business, but capable of reclaiming its reputation as a leader in innovation, engineering, and performance. Out of that pressure came the 300SL, a machine with deep racing roots, born from the lightweight tubular space frame and aerodynamic tricks of its motorsport sibling. When American importer Max Hoffman insisted that Mercedes offer a sports car to the US market, he wasn't asking for a warmed-over sedan. He wanted a halo car, something to capture imaginations in showrooms from New York to Los Angeles. What the engineers delivered was faster, sleeker, and bolder than anything the world had seen. With a fuel-injected inline-six that could outpace Ferraris and Jaguars of its day, the Gullwing became the fastest production car in the world, a title it didn't just claim on paper but proved on highways and tracks. Yet its story is not only about speed. It's about solving impossible design challenges, like how to make a low, stiff chassis accessible to drivers, which led to those iconic doors. It's about balancing the artistry of German precision with the demands of a global market. And it's about how this car transcended its mechanical nature to become a symbol of status, desire, and progress. Over the next stretch of this journey, we'll uncover the forces that shaped the Gullwing, explore the brilliance and compromises of its engineering, and trace the cultural footprint it left behind, one that still resonates with car enthusiasts, collectors, and dreamers. So buckle in, because the story ahead is more than an automotive history lesson. It's an exploration of ambition, creativity, and legacy, all embodied in one of the most remarkable cars ever built. Let's begin. The Mercedes-Benz 300SL Gullwing did not appear in a vacuum. Its story began with the racetrack, where Mercedes sought to reassert itself on the world stage after years of absence. In the early 1950s, the company returned to competition with the W194, a purpose-built racing car that would dominate prestigious events like the 24 Hours of Le Mans and the Carrera Panamericana. The lessons learned in those punishing endurance races informed every inch of the road-going Gullwing, which would arrive just a few short years later. What we see in the 1955 model is not a watered-down racer, but rather a transfer of ideas from pit lane to public road. Micro-story. At the Carrera Panamericana in 1952, the W194 shocked onlookers by defeating Ferraris, Lancias, and Jaguars across 1,900 miles of brutal Mexican terrain. The car's tubular frame was feather-light, yet incredibly strong, allowing Mercedes to fit a relatively modest straight six and still achieve high speeds. That victory did more than fill trophy cases. It signaled Mercedes was back. It also planted a seed in the minds of company executives. If this design could survive the desert's punishing heat and rough roads, perhaps it could be adapted for well-heeled customers who craved speed on the Autobahn or California freeways. This pivotal win set the tone for the Gullwing's DNA. Micro-story. Enter Max Hoffman, the Austrian-born importer who understood the American market better than anyone in Stuttgart. He sensed that post-war America was hungry for exotic European cars, but they had to be glamorous, exclusive, and unlike anything built in Detroit. Hoffman pressured Mercedes to create a production version of the W194, promising he could sell hundreds if the car combined race-bred performance with street manners. It was a bold ask because Mercedes at the time was known for conservative sedans, not radical sports cars. Without Hoffman's persistence, the 300SL might never have made the leap from track to boulevard. Context digest. Fuel injection was a centerpiece of this leap. While many competitors were still relying on carburetors, Mercedes engineers adapted direct fuel injection from their aircraft technology, creating more efficient combustion and higher power. The system boosted output from the W194's 170 horsepower to the Gullwing's impressive 240, enough to propel the car to 160 miles per hour. For 1955, this was staggering performance, putting the SL years ahead of its peers. Micro-story. When Mercedes unveiled the Gullwing at the New York Auto Show in 1954, the effect was electric. Crowds marveled at its clean lines, the long hood, the purposeful stance, and of course the doors that opened skyward like the wings of a bird. Journalists called it futuristic, glamorous, and intimidating all at once. At a time when American cars were festooned with chrome and tail fins, here was a machine of restraint and efficiency, yet one that screamed exclusivity. Buyers placed orders on the spot, not just for a car but for a statement about themselves. Owning a Gullwing was less about transportation and more about joining an elite circle. Reflection bridge. The very features that made the Gullwing desirable also revealed how uncompromising its engineering truly was. Context digest. Those iconic doors were a necessity, not an afterthought. The car's space-frame chassis had side sills so high and wide that conventional doors were impossible. Hinged at the roof, the Gullwing solution turned a structural obstacle into a visual masterpiece. But they came with drawbacks. Drivers had to contort to enter, and once inside, the cockpit could become oppressively hot, especially in summer. Mercedes provided clip-on windows and optional air vents, but comfort was always a secondary consideration. This tension between brilliance and imperfection is what gives the Gullwing its character. Micro-story. Stories abound of celebrities and industrialists who snapped up the car. Hollywood stars parked Gullwings outside Beverly Hills restaurants, European princes raced them along winding coast roads, and wealthy businessmen flaunted them in New York City. For each of these owners, the Gullwing offered a kind of double life, refined enough to arrive at the opera, fierce enough to thrill on back roads. Yet many discovered its limits too. The chassis was stiff, but the handling could be tricky, especially in wet conditions with the rear swing axle eager to bite. The Gullwing demanded respect. It was not forgiving of arrogance. Context digest. In its first year, the Gullwing stunned the automotive world by becoming the fastest production car available. Rivals from Ferrari or Aston Martin could claim prestige, but Mercedes offered aerospace-derived fuel injection and a modernist frame that seemed like science fiction to casual observers. Only 1,400 examples of the Gullwing coupe were built, ensuring exclusivity. This scarcity, combined with its advanced technology, quickly made it an object of desire that transcended simple horsepower numbers. Reflection bridge. But the Gullwing was more than a technological marvel. It was also a cultural phenomenon that echoed far beyond the showroom floor. Its image was splashed across magazine covers, featured in films, and whispered about in social circles. Micro-story. Consider a scene in mid-1950s America. A Gullwing cruising down Sunset Boulevard, catching every eye as its silver paint glimmers in neon light. To pedestrians, it wasn't just another expensive import. It was a declaration that its driver had taste, connections, and the means to acquire something unobtainable for most. That aura made the Gullwing an early influencer of luxury branding in cars, a concept now commonplace but groundbreaking then. The Mercedes star on its hood began to represent not just German engineering, but global aspiration. This fusion of identity and machine is why the Gullwing remains unforgettable. The growing reputation of the 300 SL, however, set the stage for Mercedes to face a new challenge: how to balance its uncompromising design with the demands of real-world drivers, regulators, and evolving markets. And that challenge propels us deeper into the next chapter of this story. As the reputation of the 300 SL Gullwing spread, Mercedes-Benz found itself at a crossroads. Could the company refine this uncompromising racer for the road into something more livable, while still retaining the magic that made it extraordinary? This phase of the car's story reveals the tension between innovation and practicality and how Mercedes navigated those competing forces. The Gullwing's radical space frame had made those upward swinging doors inevitable, but it also created problems for everyday use. Owners loved the performance but complained about the heat, the awkward entry, and the unpredictable handling at the edge of grip. Mercedes engineers listened, and their response would shape not only the SL lineage, but the way sports cars were conceived for decades. Micro-story. One of the first major changes came with the transition from the coupe to the Roadster in 1957. By re-engineering the frame and lowering the side sills, Mercedes could abandon the Gullwing doors and adopt conventional ones, instantly making the car more usable. They also added improved ventilation and optional soft tops, acknowledging that comfort mattered just as much as speed for wealthy clientele. The Roadster retained the fuel-injected six-cylinder engine, but softened its image. Where the coupe had been a daring experiment, the Roadster was a polished luxury tourer. This shift showed Mercedes evolving from pure engineering bravado toward a blend of performance and lifestyle appeal. Context digest. The swing-axle rear suspension, notorious for catching inexperienced drivers, was gradually tamed in the Roadster. By revising geometry and offering optional compensating springs, Mercedes reduced the snap-over steer tendency that had earned the Gullwing a reputation as a car for skilled hands only. The company recognized that an expanding customer base required safer, more predictable dynamics. This was a quiet but significant acknowledgement. Sports cars could no longer live only in the realm of daredevils. They had to respect the limits of ordinary drivers, too. Micro story. In the American market, the Roadster found instant favor. Hollywood stars who once squeezed themselves into the coupe now preferred the open-air glamour of the convertible. Photographs from the late 1950s capture icons of film and music behind the wheel, reinforcing the SL's image as both a technical achievement and a cultural accessory. Dealers reported that while the coupe had drawn admiration, the Roadster was what actually moved in numbers. The balance between spectacle and usability had shifted decisively. Reflection bridge. The Gullwing's evolution into the Roadster underscored an emerging theme. Engineering marvels must adapt if they are to endure. Context digest. Mercedes wasn't the only brand grappling with this tension. Ferrari built gorgeous but temperamental V12 sports cars. Jaguars offered fast yet fragile E-types, and Aston Martin tried to merge luxury with speed. What set Mercedes apart was its insistence on industrial rigor. Every SL, whether coupe or Roadster, carried the same meticulous build quality that the company applied to its sedans. Buyers weren't just purchasing a beautiful machine. They were buying reassurance that it would function with the precision of a Swiss watch. This consistency began to define Mercedes as the brand of reliability, even in the exotic realm of high-performance cars. Micro story. A telling anecdote comes from long-distance rallies, where 300 SLs continued to compete years after their debut. Unlike some rivals that faltered under stress, the Mercedes cars completed events with minimal mechanical trouble, reinforcing their reputation for durability. Owners boasted that they could drive their SL to the opera one night and then across a continent the next morning. This blend of usability and spectacle carved out a unique niche that Mercedes would continue to exploit. Context digest. Production numbers for the Gullwing coupe were limited, but the Roadster extended the model's life into the early 1960s. Around 1,058 Roadsters were built, surpassing the coupe's tally and confirming the demand for a more practical form. By the time production ended, the SL had cemented its dual identity as both a race-bred machine and a luxury statement piece. This duality would echo through every SL that followed, from the elegant pagoda of the 1960s to the powerful grand tourers of later decades. Reflection bridge. The SL name had become a brand within a brand, a promise of performance wrapped in elegance. Micro story. Among collectors and historians, debates still rage over whether the coupe or the Roadster better represents the essence of the 300 SL. Purists point to the coupe's uncompromising design and its iconic doors as the true expression of Mercedes' daring. Others argue that the Roadster, with its balance of usability and allure, better reflects the brand's long-term strategy. This debate itself highlights the richness of the Gullwing story. It was never just one thing. It was a conversation between extremes: innovation and comfort, exclusivity and accessibility, risk and refinement. Micro story. In Europe, the SL also played a role in diplomacy and soft power. Images of dignitaries and heads of state with the car sent subtle signals about Germany's post-war identity. Here was a nation reclaiming its place in the world, not with aggression, but with technological artistry. The Gullwing became part of a broader cultural narrative, a symbol of renewal, progress, and respectability. That symbolic weight amplified the car's legacy far beyond horsepower figures or race wins. Reflection bridge. As the years passed, the Gullwing transitioned from contemporary marvel to historical treasure. And with that came new challenges: preservation, value, and mythology. Collectors began hunting for surviving examples, while auction houses discovered that these cars commanded prices far beyond their original sticker. This shift from performance machine to collectible artifact would ensure the Gullwing story never faded. And it is this transformation, from engineering triumph to enduring cultural icon, that carries us to the final stage of its journey. The reputation of the 2004 ZX-10R didn't end when the model year passed. Instead, it hardened into legend. Riders spoke of it as the wild child of the litter class, a motorcycle that demanded respect but gave back more than most could imagine. Kawasaki's gamble on aggression had paid off, but it also created a burden. How do you follow up a machine that had so thoroughly reset expectations? The company chose to double down. Later generations of the ZX-10R would refine the formula, adding electronic aids, aerodynamic tweaks, and more manageable power delivery. But the shadow of the 2004 model always loomed large. Every new Ninja was judged against it, and every rider who swung a leg over a newer version was reminded of the bike that started the modern era of Kawasaki superbikes. Micro story. In Japan, Kawasaki insiders later admitted that the 2004 model was intentionally built as a statement piece. They wanted to announce to the world that Kawasaki was no longer in the business of conservative updates. The engineering team knew the bike would polarize, but they also knew it would re-establish the brand as bold and fearless. Their instincts proved correct. Sales were solid, but more importantly, the ZX-10R redefined how enthusiasts saw the company. Not as a follower, but as a leader willing to embrace risk. Context digest. The years following 2004 saw a technological arms race among superbike manufacturers. Traction control, ride-by-wire throttles, quick shifters, and eventually semi-active suspension systems became common. These features made bikes faster and safer, but they also tamed some of the raw character that had defined the early 2000s. In this shift, the 2004 ZX-10R became more than just a motorcycle. It became a reference point for what pure, unassisted performance felt like. Micro story. A rider in Texas who kept his 2004 model well into the 2010s became a fixture at local meets. Surrounded by newer, more advanced machines, his bike always drew a crowd. Younger enthusiasts raised on electronics and digital dashboards were amazed by how simple and mechanical the ZX-10R seemed. When he fired it up, the sound and feel spoke of a different era. For many, it was their first exposure to a superbike that relied entirely on the rider. That living reminder of the past highlighted the legacy the 2004 model carried. Reflection bridge. As decades passed, the question shifted from whether the ZX-10R was too wild to whether we would ever see its kind again. For collectors, the 2004 Ninja became a sought-after model. Its sharp styling, minimalist electronics, and reputation for ferocity made it stand out in garages otherwise filled with increasingly sophisticated machines. Auction prices began creeping upward, a sign that enthusiasts recognized its historical value. This wasn't just nostalgia, it was acknowledgement that the ZX-10R had captured lightning in a bottle. Context digest. In the broader arc of motorcycle history, certain models become turning points. The Honda CB750 defined the birth of the superbike. The Suzuki Hayabusa became the speed icon, and the Kawasaki Ninja ZX-10R of 2004 marked the point when superbikes crossed into a new era of precision and danger. Each turning point changed how riders and manufacturers thought about what was possible, and each continues to influence design philosophies today. Micro story. At an anniversary event, Kawasaki brought out a pristine 2004 ZX-10R alongside its latest model. Journalists who rode both back-to-back were stunned by the contrast. The new bike was faster on paper, safer, and more forgiving, yet many said the older machine felt more alive. That visceral connection, demanding, raw, thrilling, was something electronics could never replicate. Their write-ups didn't diminish the new model. Rather, they elevated the old one as a timeless reminder of what riding used to mean. As these perspectives accumulated, the legend of the 2004 ZX-10R transcended statistics. It became a symbol of an era when manufacturers pushed boundaries without nets, when riders tested themselves against unfiltered machines, and when Kawasaki chose boldness over caution. Reflection bridge. The lesson that remains is not just about motorcycles, but about how risk, vision, and timing can reshape an industry. The ZX-10R's influence continues in Kawasaki's dominance on racetracks worldwide, especially in the World Superbike Championship, where later versions carried the torch. Every victory carries a thread that traces back to 2004, to the moment Kawasaki reminded the world who they were. For riders, the bike remains a benchmark of courage, skill, and thrill. And for the motorcycle community, it stands as proof that sometimes the most important machines are not the safest or the easiest, but the ones that challenge us to rise to their level. The legacy of the 2004 Kawasaki ZX-10R is more than horsepower figures or lap times. It's a story about ambition, about pushing boundaries, and about creating something unforgettable. And that is why, decades later, people still talk about it not just as a motorcycle, but as a monster that defined its moment. The Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing's journey reminds us that cars can become much more than machines. They can serve as cultural touchstones, engineering milestones, and vessels of aspiration. What began as a daring experiment rooted in motorsport became a production car that stunned the world, evolved into a refined Roadster, and later ascended into legend as one of the most sought-after collectibles in history. Along the way, it shaped how automakers balanced risk and comfort, how collectors defined authenticity, and how modern brands mined their past to fuel their future. The Gullwing has become a mirror for our own desires, reflecting the allure of speed, the prestige of rarity, and the artistry of design. When we look at those iconic doors rising skyward, we are reminded that true innovation often emerges not from convenience, but from necessity, and that beauty can be born of solving problems in ways nobody expects. Its legacy endures not only in museums and private collections, but also in the imaginations of new generations who may never drive one, but still recognize its silhouette instantly. That recognition, that near-universal awe, proves the Gullwing has transcended its era to become timeless. For us as automotive enthusiasts, revisiting this story is about more than admiration. It is about understanding how a car became a legend, and how that legend continues to shape the culture of speed, luxury, and design even today. Thanks for riding with us on Octane Origins. See you next time, automotive enthusiasts.